Welcome back. So, what did we do with the speedometer?
So the speedometer is an interesting one. The speedometer is actually a combination of 3 separate speedometers because of the various levels of function and wear that I found on speedometers. To start, I did not want an aftermarket gauge package. I love the International style of gauges for the period. I loved what International did on the 79s with the engine turn decals. I wanted a factory ammeter to go with the factory wiring. I love the sweeping of the gauge kind of in a rectangular shape as opposed to a round format. In particular, the 79 I wanted to keep because it was the only year they had a 0 to 100 mile an hour speedometer. In 80, they went to an 85 mile an hour speedometer, and prior to that it was 120. So the uniqueness of the 79 only having the 100 mile an hour speedometer was kind of what sold me. Again, because I wanted a day 2 look, enthusiasts wouldn't have ripped out all the gauges to produce a...
On day 2, right?
Exactly. So I love stepping into a car, in particular my Scout, and sitting in the seat and saying, this is exactly how the vehicle felt and looked right off the showroom floor. And so I wanted to stay true to
What's
that.
surrounding those, and we didn't talk about this before, is those Trans Am looking trims.
Yeah, the engine turn decal.
Yeah, that is so cool.
Yeah, and I have Mike and Jennifer at Scoutco to thank. They have done they're a true supporter of the enthusiast community. All the decals on this vehicle were produced by Scoutco. They produce engine turn logo, engine turn decals for the AC bar and the dash that look exactly like the original. And I insisted on preserving that look because there's nothing that says late 70s as an engine turned kind of swirl looking decal on the dash.
Another thing 70s is the torque flight automatic transmission, and you stuck with that.
That's right, I stuck with it. Again, most enthusiasts in the late 70s with a vehicle like this and into the 80s would not have done a major tear up of the powertrain. So I opted to keep the torque flight with some modifications because it's a nostalgic cult type transmission. It's a 3-speed automatic, and for the driving that I do, there's no reason why I needed to upgrade to anything better, anything more modern. So I kept the torque flight, and I rebuilt it, of course, with a B&M transmission kit that included some modification features to help improve line pressure in certain areas and overall drivability. That worked out very well. I also used a B&M deep sump 12-quart pan, more just because I could, and also because the more oil, the less probability of an overheat condition. So I'm very happy that I stuck with the torque flight.
Yeah, had to have a little Chrysler in it, didn't we?
Yes. Being a Ford guy, I can assure you that putting a Ford transmission was not in the cards on this vehicle.
No, so, okay, engine, what did we do under the hood?
Well, this vehicle was originally built with a 345 with a 4-barrel thermoquad manifold and carburetor, of course. The previous owner, I'm the 3rd owner. The 2nd owner was kind of a middleman that owned the vehicle very briefly. But the factory engine was gone. It had a 304 in it, which was an adequate engine for this vehicle. But I still, since it didn't have the original 345, I decided to replace the 304 with something even better. I was able to source a 392 improved cooling engine from an engine remanufacturer in Washington, and I stealthily installed this engine in a way that the customer, an onlooker looking under the engine, under the hood, would not know that the engine, it's a 392. It looks exactly like the 345 would have looked, but it gives me that little secret.
Right.
That not only is it a 392, but the improved cooling block. Now, some people would argue that's not really necessary for a Scout, but it's unique and it's different. So that's why I decided to use a 392.
Okay, so we used the thermoquad, we rebuilt that. What would we do for Distributor?
The Distributor is a Mallory Unilite. You can't buy them anymore. They've been discontinued. I was originally planning to use a factory Distributor with a Pertronix system, which is a perfectly adequate system. But my Mallory Unilite I purchased for my 76 Scout, but I didn't use it very long. And I wanted to, I've always liked Mallory systems, and I was able to get this unit rebuilt because it was sitting for so long since I didn't use it. And I actually was able to custom tune the centrifugal advance feature through an authorized rebuild shop in California to give me a little bit more of a custom spark advance tune, you know, to accommodate the engine.
Wiper motor?
The wiper motor is the best of three. I didn't want to go with a modified wiper motor from a different vehicle to try to make it fit. That's something that some people have successfully done. And I didn't want to opt for an all-original wiper motor of suspect quality, so I basically took the best parts of three and I combined them together to produce the motor I have now. And the number one thing that I looked out for was brush quality. I don't believe brushes are an easy commodity now. No. So I had three motors, and the motor that had the least wear was, not surprisingly, the motor that came out of California desert. Naturally, because they're not used very much.
Right, they get turned on much.
Right. So that's how I ended up with the wiper motor.
So we have RPT motor mounts?
Yes, we do. We have RPT motor mounts and transmission mount, and I believe I was the generous folks at Super Scout Specialists were the ones who supplied me with these mounts, along with many other items on the truck.
The Radiator came from?
The Radiator came from IH Parts America. They produce through their website a brass OEM quality 3-core radiator that is, I would say it's a little bit more expensive than the aftermarket aluminum radiators, but I insisted on using a factory looking and factory functioning radiator that would accommodate the factory fan shroud, as well as all the other ancillary components. And I thought it was a very great product produced by IH Parts America.
So we were talking before about the engine. What camshaft did you use in that?
This engine, thankfully, we have some aftermarket support for camshafts for these old IH engines. The one I decided to use was a Comp Cams 260. There's more aggressive cams, there's milder cams, but for my purposes, for the sound I wanted and a little bit of an improvement in breathing on these vehicles at higher RPM, I opted for the 260, and I think I'm pretty happy with the results.
And then what did you do to the thermoquad?
The thermoquad I completely restored. I did not want to go to an aftermarket carburetor. I wanted to keep the period correct original spread bore carburetor that was used on IH products. So I pretty much just rebuilt it with some brass floats and a few other items. So I decided on the thermoquad also because I consider a thermoquad to be one of the pinnacles of carburetor quality and in some regards technology. It was the tail end of the carburetor period, and thermoquads were used for a variety of reasons, including emissions, but also for their very accurate metering qualities. So again, I wanted to keep the period look, and I like the challenge of using an original carburetor.
When you have a good thermoquad, you have a good one.
Yes.
When you got one that's got the warped plastics and all that, they don't run so well, but
Right.
It was a good carburetor.
Right.
Anything else under the hood?
No, for the majority of the items under the hood were kept primarily stock. The underhood appearance is stock, original factory heads, original, as I said, spread bore carburetor. Interestingly, I decided to keep all of the emissions equipment, not only to look appropriate for the restoration, but to actually be fully functional. So all the thermactor switches, for adjusting the air cleaner, the EGR valve, all the temperature-controlled switches, all those items were restored or replaced.
Is there a smog pump under there?
There is no smog pump currently.
That's the only thing then?
That's the only thing.
Okay. So moving on to the body, what did they do? How much work? How much is original? The fenders, windshield frame, doors, tub, what did we do there?
The majority of the body work was primarily cosmetic. There was absolutely no rust whatsoever. At least no rust that was anything aside from superficial rust from condensation in the desert. So we didn't have to replace any panels. We didn't have to remove any panels. All the original welds, spot welds, everything you can imagine, everything is original factory as it rolled off the assembly line. All we had to do was basically tear it all down, sandblast it, fix the dents and dings, and put it into the condition that you see here.
So was there any special primers, and what kind of paint is this?
The original paint, I should say the base coat is a PPG base coat. The clear coat is a BASF brand. I used epoxy paint for the undercarriage for its durability. But for the most part, these are pretty relatively easy to acquire paints. All the colors that I was able to get were reproduced by PPG. Including the wheel color. The body work was an exercise in getting things incredibly straight and getting the paint getting basically the paint to the highest level of quality that we could produce.
So it was frame off, rotisserie?
Yes.
The whole 9 yards?
Yes.
Moving on, what do we do with the axles?
The axles are original Dana 44s. I wanted a period correct look, and I also wanted to keep with the style that an enthusiast would have kept as a day 2 resto mod. So the front axle is all chromoly shafts from Yukon Gear. I use Yukon Gear ring and pinions. These are 411 axle ratios. I decided on a True Track made by Eaton Detroit for the front, and for the rear I decided to go with a Eaton Detroit locker.
So explain the front. What's the True Track? What is that?
A True Track is it's a helical style limited slip differential, and what it does is it uses shear forces between gears. It's actually quite an interesting design concept. It does not use friction clutches, but again it uses gears themselves to create biasing torque, which then can transfer torque from a wheel with grip to a wheel, basically a wheel with little grip to the opposing side. It's a great product because when you're in four-wheel drive mode, it gives you a balance between drivability and torque transfer. And that's a very important thing for steering efforts and steering control.
You have a Detroit in the front, you're not steering it.
Yes, a Detroit locker in the front is a very aggressive feature. It's a perfectly fine feature for a true rock crawler, but for a 4x4 that has mixed use, it's probably a better choice to stick with something a little bit more mild in the front end.
Okay, what do we do in the fuel tank area?
The fuel tank is actually a cross-linked polyethylene tank.
MTS?
I believe so.
Yeah, okay.
I think there's only one manufacturer out there. Yep. I use that cross-linked polyethylene tank with a pretty standard fuel sender. I opted to not use the 33-gallon aftermarket tanks, not because they aren't great quality and not because they aren't a good solution for people looking for range, but I wanted to use the factory skid plate. I happen to have, this is actually a donor skid plate from my old 76 that I used as a parts vehicle. But this vehicle did have a skid plate option. It just didn't have that skid plate on when I bought the vehicle.
Interesting.
Yeah, so anyway, I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to preserve the original skid plate, and I can only do that by using a 19-gallon tank.
So fuel from what did you do to the fuel system? The
fuel system is pretty stock. I basically fabricated an original fuel steel line from the carburetor down to the outlet of the fuel pump. It still uses a mechanical fuel pump. Standard fuel pump that you can get at any auto parts store or in your area. I then ran new lines back to the tank to the sender, and pretty much kept all the electricals stock. So very little modification to this system. What I did do is I did maintain the factory original charcoal canister. I did manage to reuse the factory oil air separator, so I kept all the emissions equipment because of its rarity under hood and in the rear quarter stock.
So moving on to the interior, let's dive in there. So you got bucket seats, you got russet which is one of my favorite and yours too, I guess.
Yes, it is.
So tell us about what you did in the interior.
So this vehicle came with the originally the Highland Blue had a plaid premium interior option. So I had all the components from the premium interior from the original color scheme, but when I went to green, obviously I couldn't use the blue color, it would clash. So I ended up with the russet plaid material that I sourced from SMS Fabrics in Oregon. We basically duplicated the russet plaid to exact detail down to the original stitch work and piping. The only thing I changed on the interior was the black carpet. It originally came with an orange colored carpet, and I wanted a little bit more contrast, so I used a black carpeting and contrasted that with the russet.
The door panels are still color keyed this way?
Yes, the door panels are all color keyed aside from the carpeting at the base of the door. That was originally an orange kind of russet color as well, but I opted for the door panels
black there too?
to go black. Yes.
Gotcha. Headliner, what else you do inside?
The headliner is actually a unique headliner. I was able to cover over the original headliner with a little bit of a softer material, but I was able to retain all the lines from the factory headliner that I believe were only around for a year or two. It doesn't have the perforated headliner that the earlier Scouts had. It has an actual interesting design headliner, and I was very careful to keep those features on the vehicle when I redid the interior.
Dash pad,
The dash pad was produced by Just Dashes out of California. It's an expensive part, but they did an excellent job reproducing the original dash pad that had a lot of wear and cracks. And I'm very happy with the results.
You have to send them a core, or are they?
Yes.
Okay.
You send them a core, and then they redo it and send it back.
Interesting.
To my knowledge, there is nobody out there who does as high quality a job as Just Dashes. They really do recreate the exact original specs.
That's a good source.
Yes.
What else in the interior? Anything left?
Radio. Did we talk about radio already, or we did? Okay. Aside from the factory components, all of the original aluminum parts I re-anodized or repolished.
Outside trim?
Yes. The outside trim was straightened, then polished, then re-anodized to be as close to original as possible.
And then where'd the bumpers come from?
The bumpers came from Sean Barber at Anything Scout. He did a fantastic job, him and his crew, on some of the highest quality bumpers I think I've ever come across on a...
But you can only get them now if you buy a vehicle from him.
Yeah, so Sean did such good work and put such good effort into these bumpers and the frame sliders as well that the labor, my belief is that the labor was not worth the effort to produce any longer. So I was one of the last customers to be able to receive kind of a la carte parts from Anything Scout and not have a full vehicle build.
I see a number of parts from Scout Light Line, the marker lights, probably the IH emblems, tail lights.
Yep, everything that Lightline would produce for these vehicles, of course I sourced brand new.
But those short armed mirrors, what did we do there? Because those are almost impossible to find with that base.
Yeah, so what I did is I kind of in the typical fashion with Scouts, since parts aren't very readily available, I was able to make 2 mirrors out of 4.
Okay.
So I sourced 4 used mirrors from all different parts of the country, amassed them together, found the best components to make 2 mirrors, and then what I ended up doing is stripping them down, re-chroming them, re-mirroring them, and then of course
brand new.
That was a very painstaking process. I did not want to use the 1980 style, which was very close, and
right.
I didn't want foot. I wanted to use the correct mirrors.
To be true to that,
yes.
which is tough to do these days.
Yes.
So, give us credits. Where'd you buy the parts from? We know Brothers did most of the paint and body.
Yes.
If you want to list anybody we've left out.
Oh, there's tons of vendors out there, so my apologies if I missed the critical ones, but the Lightline dealers have been great. Jason Rodell from Rodell Brothers.
Absolutely.
He was really helpful in the early days in sourcing parts. The guys, in particular Rob at Super Scout Specialists, I can't tell you how many hours I spent talking to him, shooting ideas off of him on this build. And Rob
Can I
knew.
bill you those hours? Never mind.
Rob knew that I was a unique character, and I wasn't a liar. He knew that I meant what I said when I really wanted to do a high-end build. And so anything I could source from Lightline typically was sourced through Super Scout specialists.
Appreciate that. Parts America?
IH Parts America had some really great products, that particularly suspension products. A lot of the items that I didn't mention earlier are from IH Parts America. I did say shackles, just all kinds of different custom fabricated parts that IHPA sells. Jeff Ismail and his crew, I sourced through them.
Good folks. Anybody else?
I mentioned Sean Barber, SMS Fabrics out of Oregon, did a fantastic job recreating the russet plaid. I used Shelby Trim from Sterling Heights, Michigan, did the majority of the interior fabrication work. I did the install, but they did all the interior fabrication work on the vehicle. I can't think of any other major vendor. The powertrain, most of the work on the powertrain, the gearbox, the transmission and transfer case and axles was done by Detroit Gearbox, a guy that I've gotten to know quite well, a very experienced rebuilder. My engine I sourced from S&J Engines out of Washington. So far I've had a fantastic experience with the quality of the engine work that they had done.
I didn't ask you this, but if someone has a question, do you mind throwing out your email, or would you rather them contact Binder TV?
Yeah, if people have questions, they can always contact Binder TV, and I can, through John, I can always answer questions. I'm an engineer, and I'm an engineer at Ford.
So you're kind of busy.
Well, the truth is, I'm always an enthusiast, and I'd like to take some of my knowledge, not secret knowledge, but knowledge that I've gained in the OEM world, and help enthusiasts out with information that I consider non-anecdotal, real information that they can use, not information that
That's why we're here today. I think we've learned a lot from this conversation.
I appreciate it. I think the best way to reach out to me is really through Binder Planet.
There you go. That's the best place.
I'm a member of Binder Planet. My call name is really basic. It's JTORRE4272. My avatar is a picture of my Scout. I periodically go on Binder Planet.
They are a good source for information to learn, a good archive for learning things, binderplanet.com.
Yeah, it's a really great community of enthusiasts as well as experts. As some of you might know, I do an annual seminar, at least for the past few years, on drivetrain 101 design at the National Convention.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that the knowledge I've gained over the years as an engineer, I've been able to convey that to some of the enthusiasts, to help them in their projects. Pass it on, pay it forward. So again, I'm humbled by the amount of support I've received on my own build, and I'm very humbled by people reaching out to me asking for advice on their own projects.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to add?
I just wanted to thank the IH community. This is a community of friends as much as it is enthusiasts. The outpouring of help, people truly willing to go out of their way to answer my questions and to provide me with the information I needed to keep my build going, has been outstanding. I'm an enthusiast in a few other areas, automotive areas, but I can assure you that what I've learned through the IH community is such a unique family of folks, all to its own. I've never come across the sense of family and community that I have with the IH crowd.
It's from the heart too. Yeah. So we want to thank you for watching Inside IH on Binder TV. Looking for information, go to www.bindertv.com. You can contact us there, and watch for a bonus episode. We're going to stick around, come back in a little bit, and look at some memorabilia that Joe wants to show and tell. But for now, good night.